Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Sri Vishaka Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vacharam pangam langyate girim yat kripatamam vande Shri Gurudinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam Namam Vishvadaya Krishna Prishta Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Paschachadishita. Hare Krishna, thank you so much for being here this Wednesday evening. So today we will start with the 6th chapter, the final chapter in module 1. And Rup Raghunath Prabhu, what's the sequence in which we are doing things today?
Yeah, Prabhuji, we will do your presentation, and if time permits, there will be Q&A.
Okay. So I can start with the presentation.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, good. Let me share my screen then. Okay, so we are starting with the 6th chapter titled Dhyan Yoga. So a quick recap in terms of where we are. And as I mentioned, I tend to do it, even though it's repetitive, I tend to do it frequently. And the reason I do it is because it's probably very important for us to understand the flow of the conversation in the Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes we kind of lose the forest for the leaves, right? We focus too much on the verse or the nuances of the words there, which is a good thing, as long as it is done in conjunction with the overall flow. Because as we have already seen that we are in the 6th chapter, and already Krishna has spoken so many things that are apparently contradictory. And unless we understand the context, why Krishna at what point is saying a particular thing, easy for us to get confused and also to confuse others in explaining. So that's why I do tend to repeat the conversation just in a way to emphasize what the flow has been. So the first chapter, Arjuna refuses to fight, gives 5 reasons why he will not fight. Chapter 2 is a summary of the Bhagavad Gita, table of contents, Prabhupada calls it. And he essentially, Krishna gives 3 categories of instructions to Arjuna. He talks about the nature of the soul, and that's on the platform of Sankhya, Gyan, that you're not the body, but you're the soul. Krishna talks about karma, early karma kand, the importance of performing one's prescribed duties, and also the dangers of not performing your prescribed duties. And then Krishna then talks about his favorite topic, which is Nishkam Karma, right, which is essentially performing your prescribed duties from a platform of Atma, from the platform of you're the soul, right? So these 3 things are the main things Krishna talks about. Now Arjun presents his confusion of the interplay between karma and gyan. That should I do my prescribed duties, or should I sit and meditate, or give up the duties because by nature they are binding? And then Krishna introduces this very important concept, indeed in spirituality as a whole, especially for practicing devotees, the notion of adhikar, that one must act according to their level of advancement. So that's why Krishna seems to give ambiguous instructions, right? He sometimes says karma is better than gyan, then sometimes he'll say gyan is better than karma, sometimes he'll say they are the same. Now, all 3 of them cannot be the same. All 3 statements cannot be true. And the reason is that Krishna is saying that depending on one's advancement, one needs to act according to that level, that adhikar. What are you? What is your right to do? So a person who has still not controlled the senses, then the recommendation is karma. For a person who has brought the senses under control, the recommendation is gyan. And even for a person who has brought the senses under control, the recommendation is nishkam karma, because the implicit point being made over here is that the senses are so strong that they can always pull down a person even when he is striving to control them. But karma provides that protection. Now, this notion of adhikar is also very important for practicing devotees. Because when we start practicing a Krishna consciousness, then we are exposed to all kinds of injunctions and all kinds of devotees also, right? There are some devotees who are whose sadhana is ironclad. They'll get up 2 o'clock in the morning, chant their rounds, do the deity worship, and serve at the temple, and so 24/7, and they're perfectly happy doing that. But there are devotees who are either practicing for a long time or practicing from previous life. That's their adhikar. And then there are other devotees who start and then they say, okay, we should also get up in the morning and chant. But they haven't reached that level of purification. So then bhakti becomes an encumbrance. There was with Prabhupada, there was a disciple who came in, a new disciple, and he heard about Haridas Thakur. And then he said that I will chant like Haridas Thakur. So he would get up in the morning and Haridas Thakur, he would chant 23.5 hours in a day. Essentially only 30 minutes he would not chant, but 23.5 hours a day he would chant, 3 rounds of 64. He would chant. And then that's what this person was doing. He would just get up, he would chant, sleep for half an hour and chant. And then everybody was like, wow, we have a pure devotee. or some people were getting upset because, I mean, that person was essentially not able to do any of the service. He would only sit and chant. So then the matter came to Prabhupada's attention. And then Prabhupada said, just wait and see. And what happened? Actually, within a matter of a few weeks, that person disappeared, never to be seen again. Because externally he was emulating. For Haridas Thakur, the non-stop chanting, it was a symptom of his internal attraction. Because he was non-stop thinking about Krishna, so the chanting just happened. But for devotees like us who are still developing that love, we chant under the instructions of the Guru. The Guru says chant at least 16 rounds every day, and then we do that, whether we like it or not, whether it's attentive or inattentive chanting. We do it because we have taken that vow, and the process is one that purifies us and ultimately increases our attraction. So as we practice more and more, our adhikar also grows. And we continue to act according to adhikar, which is why the shelter of a guru is important, because the guru will constantly modify the instruction based on the adhikar of a disciple. So Krishna introduces a very important notion for practicing devotees. In this case, Arjun, but it's universal there, that act according to your level of advancement and constantly strive to advance. These two instructions go hand in hand. So having spoken about Nishkam Karma, then Krishna, he ends the third chapter talking about how the intelligence is the safeguard against lust. And the segue is that how do you use your intelligence, which is by pursuing the path of jnana. So Nishkam Karma, if it is practiced diligently, matures into Atma Gyan, right? So as I noted before, this Gyan is actually knowledge of the self. It is not so much knowledge of the Vedas or knowledge of the do's and the don'ts, or knowledge of rituals, etc. Not that. This is Atma Gyan, knowledge of the self, meaning the realization that I'm a spiritual, eternal soul and not the body. So chapter 4 talked about how to get to know what you need to do and do it, right? So the whole Imam Vivasvate Yogam that Krishna says, I spoke to Vivasvan, the disciplic succession, Evam Parampara Praptam, the importance of listening to a guru, Tadvidipni Patena, inquiring from the guru. So the whole process of getting the knowledge, to know what needs to be done, and then doing it, and that would result in Atma Gyan. So now that Krishna is speaking about Gyan, Arjun once again gets confused. Right? So in the third chapter, Krishna had clarified. Now, fourth chapter, he again speaks, apparently glorifying Gyan. So he says, which is better, right? And Krishna says, first he says they are the same. Ekam Sankhyam cha yogam cha ya pashyati sa pashyati. They are the same because they both are leading to the same destination. So just like if you're going down a path and there are milestones, that one comes sooner than the other, but they are the same because they are on the same path. So you cannot say one is superior to the other, because unless you hit the first milestone, you can't hit the second milestone. So they are important. But having established the sameness, Krishna still reinforces the same point he made in third chapter, that Nishkam Karma is still superior because it purifies and protects. Now, the difference between the third and the fifth chapter is, because the question is the same, that in the third chapter, Krishna talks about Nishkam Karma from the platform of material detachment, that you're not the body. So don't be attached to the material aspect of your existence. In the 5th chapter, Krishna talks about Nishkam Karma from the perspective of spiritual attachment. So, to further that, Krishna introduces the 3 doers, the Jiva, the Paramatma, and the modes of material nature. And in doing so, Krishna also introduces for the first time himself as Paramatma. So he puts himself into the mix, and he begins to glorify one who is now looking to make advancement towards Paramatma. Right? So you see the difference, that so far Krishna was talking about one who is detaching from the material conception. Then there is the recommendation to attach to the conception of the spiritual self. Now Krishna is talking about attachment to the super soul. So an Atma Jnani is able to develop, is able to transcend the duality of matter. But the person who has Paramatma Gyan actually develops affection for everyone. An Atma Jnani is at a platform of neutrality, but one who is developing affection for the super soul is transitively developing affection for all the jivas, regardless of whether the person is a Chandal, whether the person is a Brahman, because he sees all the jivas in terms of their relationship with the Paramatma. So he says that Paramatma that is worshipable by me, that is loved by me, is also loving this particular jiva, whether it's a dog or a dog eater. So that jiva is also the object of my love. And when Krishna comes into the picture, then liberation also comes into the picture, right? So in the 5th chapter, Krishna introduces himself as a Paramatma. He introduces the notion of liberation. And most importantly, he introduces the concept of spiritual attachment. So that brings us to the 6th chapter. That in the 5th chapter, Krishna concludes by introducing the natural progression of the Nishkam Karma Yogi. So as they make progression, they begin to develop attraction for the super soul. In the 6th chapter, Krishna will speak in greater depth on the principles of Ashtanga Yoga, because that is a means to further mature the attraction for the super soul. So the 6th chapter has 47 verses, one of the longer chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, but not the longest in terms of purport, etc. Because Prabhupada actually is, he does not speak a lot about Ashtanga Yoga other than criticizing it and comparing it with Bhakti Yoga, saying it's impractical and most of the people who follow it are bogus and this is not the process for this age. So really doesn't develop too much the theme that actually Krishna is developing. But understanding, and we see that Acharya's comment that Krishna has put this chapter here to convince us that if you're thinking about this process, be warned that very difficult, the results are not assured, and the chances of fall down are very, very high. So rather than hiding it, Krishna puts it out in the open with the big sign saying, like sometimes you go on a trek and there's one path and there's another path and there's a warning on that path, and that this is very difficult, level of difficulty is 10 and you might fall down, etc., forewarned. So Krishna kind of does that. Otherwise, if he doesn't put that sign, there are people who might look at that path and say, well, there's no sign on it, let's see what happens. And then they may spend many lifetimes in that path. So broadly speaking, divided into three sections. First is introducing and advancing Ashtanga Yoga. The second is practicing Ashtanga Yoga. There Krishna gives details of the do's and the don'ts of Ashtanga Yoga. And the last section is essentially it's the pitfalls of Ashtanga Yoga. What is the destination of a yogi? Basically of a failed yogi, right? So we have advancing, practicing, and arriving, or what's the destination. So how have we come to this point? How have we arrived to this point? Krishna started off by talking Sakam Karma, and the person at this stage has strong desires for enjoyment. They follow prescribed duties, which means they're not doing vikarma. They're basically doing pious activities, but it's karma with a desire to enjoy because they have strong material desires. And the focus here is to control the urges. Why? Because even though you enjoy materially, but you enjoy according to the prescriptions. It's not unlicensed enjoyment. For every do that is permitted, there are also don'ts. Right? Fine. You can have sex, but only within the institution of marriage. You can earn wealth as long as you're giving in charity, and the wealth is earned by the prescribed means, right? So the nature of the modes is that one have unbridled urges, and we can see that around us, that majority of the people are at the stage of vikarma, which means that they have an urge, they follow it. And so in Sakam Karma, the jiva is trained to control the urges, which leads to Nishkam Karma, and the person at this stage desires peace, because the nature of material enjoyment is that it is troubling. They continue to perform the prescribed duties as they did in Sakam Karma, but now they have controlled their desires. So from a practical perspective, in addition to the urges, they also have controlled their senses. Right? So the senses are not artificially corralled, but based on long practice of Nishkam Karma, based on the understanding that the difference between matter and spirit, the senses are controlled. Which leads us to Ashtanga Yoga. So you can see how the desires are changing. That in Sakam Karma, there was a desire for material enjoyment. In Nishkam Karma, there's a desire for peace. In Ashtanga Yoga, there's a desire for liberation. Right? In Nishkam Karma, one performs prescribed duties. In the mature state of Ashtanga Yoga, one gives up all duties. Right? And no material desires. And now the control is on, in addition to the urges and the senses, the control is on the mind also, because mind becomes the weapon by which one cuts their material connection. Right? So we also see now how this progression is very important. And Srila Prabhupada makes this point over and over again, that one who jumps to the stage of Ashtanga Yoga without having gone through this purificatory process, wherein they have learned to control the urges and the senses, when they have divested themselves of material desires, it's just show bottle. Sometimes he says it's just cheap gymnastics, sometimes he says just cheating, but he's essentially subscribing to this notion of people trying to practice something that is fairly advanced and difficult without going through the preliminary stage. Like you straight away go and start writing a PhD thesis without having graduated from school, right? Not going to happen, or rarely going to happen. So the focus here is gradual advancement. So the 8 limbs of yoga, Krishna doesn't speak about this. Prabhupada speaks about it in the purport, and essentially it begins from the stage of yama. So So yam and niyams, they go hand in hand. Yams are prohibition and niyams are injunctions. That don't do this, but do this, right? So there are many, many yams and niyams. And the reason an Astang yogi is able to do that, because he has already gone through the purificatory stage. He's able to control the senses and the urges. So he's able to submit himself to the yamas and niyamas. Asanas. So asanas are essentially physical postures that are done. And the reason the asanas are taught is to be prepared for the later stages of meditation. Because one has to sit for long, long times to meditate. And if one's body is not suitably trained, then one will never be able to achieve that. Like somebody sitting and their shoulders start paining or their back start paining, and then they need to walk, or or they cannot maintain the posture. So the subsequent stages cannot be practiced. And pranayam, controlling of the breath, it also extends one's life. It clears one's mind. It extends one's life. And the reason is, again, because it's a long process. So not only has to one be in good health, but also one needs to live a long life. And at advanced stages, the yogis, they're able to live for literally hundreds and thousands of years. So according to the Patanjali sutras, that one's life is measured by the number of breaths that one takes. So as we see in the fourth canto of the Bhagavatam, the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, that when he became advanced in yoga, he was able to control his breath to the point that he was barely breathing. So the fewer breaths you take, the longer life you live. Because let's assume you're given a life of, let's say, 10 million breaths. And if you're able to take one breath a year, you have a lifetime of 10 million years there. And pranayam also, it clears your mind there. So the first 4 stages are considered to the preliminary stages, the yoga ruruda stages, wherein Krishna is not really there, Paramatma is not really there, but it is getting ready for the subsequent stages. Pratyahara is essentially the transition stage. So ahar is food. Pratyahara is basically now, where do you draw your sustenance from? And at this stage, the person, instead of external, begins to draw the sustenance from one's internal conception. So the senses are pointing inwards, focused on the mind. So the ahar, the food, is coming from within and not from outside. So, and dharana is what is your conception? So dharana is important because Astang Yoga is a process that can lead to whatever destination that you set your mind to. So at the dharana stage, one says that, okay, I am going to use my dhyan and samadhi to focus on the Brahman or the Paramatma or Swayam Bhagwan or something else, right? So dharana is, what is it that you acquire as the object of your meditation? And dhyan and samadhi are essentially the same, but samadhi is a more concentrated form of dhyan. So these 6 processes, in a way, are really getting ready for the last 2 processes, where one is completely able to absorb themselves in the meditation of their whatever they choose to meditate on. So quickly, the 8 stages of the yoga: yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. Neeta, do you want to mute your mic? Okay. Okay, so yam is prohibitions, niyam is injunctions, asana is bodily exercises, pranayam is breath control, pratyahar is drawing within, dharana is establishing an internal focus, dhyan is meditation, and samadhi is absorption. Right? So like I mentioned, Krishna doesn't talk about it, Prabhupada talks briefly about it, but it's good for us to know, because we will at some point or the other, if not already, be faced with this, having to explain to somebody, because externally, even now, yoga seems to become like it's a buzzword, attractive, that I'm doing yoga, right? And the yoga studios are very popular, and a lot of things are done. And some place they go, they'll make you chant Om and focus on the space between your forehead. Sometimes they'll make you do something that sounds kind of mystical, etc. But if the devotees have a clear understanding of how the Ashtanga Yoga works, it protects their own absorption in bhakti and can help others also. So the first four stages, as I mentioned, are preliminary. The fifth is the transition, and the last three are basically the more advanced stages. So just in terms of summation, the process of the preliminary stages, it helps to one to develop detachment from material things. Like Krishna says, gold and pebble, they see as the same. Situation means that they are same to honor and dishonor. People means that Brahmanagavi Hastani, that whether the person is an elephant or the soul is an elephant or a Brahman or a cow or a Chandal. So that kind of equanimity comes, and that detachment is complemented by the attachment to the super soul. So this is kind of the driving force in the earlier stages. Why will the person submit to yam, niyam, and pranayam and asana? Because they have already developed this detachment. They're beginning to develop this attachment, and they are so that is the impetus that they need to see it grow or fructify. So there is no actual growth of spiritual attachment at this stage, but there is a growth in the desire for spiritual attachment. Like if you look at the earlier stages, yam, niyam, asana, and pranayam, they're all material. That's why Dhyan Yoga comes under the section of karma, because the first four stages is all karma. They're all activities, controlled activities, but that's karma, right? So Krishna is not very strongly there, but at this stage, the person has developed a desire, and that's why the person is willing to submit themselves to this. And so the arc of development is that through the detachment that has been developed through the preliminary stages of karma and gyan, and the desire to further their attachment that is now beginning to appear, one begins to practice Ashtanga Yoga. If the person does not have that detachment, then Ashtanga Yoga is a waste of time. If the person does not have the desire for the attachment, again, Ashtanga Yoga is a waste of time. Now, in the preliminary stage, what is the biggest challenge? Control of mind, because the detachment is still not complete, and attachment is a concept. It's still not there. So Krishna gives the solution, abhyasena tekvanteya vairagya. So he says abhyas and vairagya. So if you notice, Krishna gives two things to do: practice, which is abhyas, and determination. What do you practice? That you you practice the the growing desire. So there's a desire for spiritual attachment. So you practice more of it. And there is also the development of material detachment. You continue to nurture it with determination. Right? So that is the abhyas and vairagya. Vairagya means detached from the material conception. Abhyas means practice to be attached to the spiritual conception. Right? So we see both these things that are happening during the preliminary stages. In the more advanced stages, one has already developed natural detachment. So no need to practice. There's no need to, the vairagya part is there. It's kind of has been matured. Now the yogi focuses on establishing the goal of life, dharana. That is it Krishna, is it Paramatma, four-handed Vishnu, impersonal Brahman, and having established that dharana, they begin to meditate on it. Right? Then comes the stage of dhyana and samadhi. Now comes the question of destination of the yogi, the last section. This question comes, it's instructive. So Arjuna asks, what is the destination of a failed yogi? And it's a little surprising question because Krishna has been speaking about this process. It's like I come to you and I speak about that you follow this process and you get good health. Right. And I'm enthusiastic about it. I'm speaking to you, you're listening to it. And then you raise your hand and say, what if I can't practice it? So when would you raise your hand and say, what if I cannot practice it? When the process is too difficult. And that's what Arjuna is reflecting at this point. He says, it's controlling the mind is like controlling the wind. So what is the destination of a failed yogi? So what happens if one is unable to control the mind? So like we mentioned, there are two stages of the yoga. The first four stages, the yoga rurukshu, where the focus is on controlling the mind, developing detachment, or the yoga rudha, where the person has controlled the mind but is now looking to attach it to the supreme. So a fall down can happen at either of the two stages. Now, obviously, at an earlier stage, the chance of fall down are more, but Arjuna is so skeptical about the process that Krishna shares with him, yes, you can fall down at either of the two stages. So when one falls in the earlier stage, then Krishna says, such a person takes birth in an opulent aristocratic family. Right? So Arjuna's question specifically was, he gives the analogy of a riven cloud. So there is one cloud that represents material existence. There is one cloud that represents spiritual existence. And Arjuna is saying that the jiva who takes on to this path of Astanga Yoga is like the piece of cloud that has detached from the material cloud and is trying to attach to the spiritual cloud, but fails to do so. So that small cloud, it does not have the anchor in the material, nor it has attached to the spiritual. So it's nowhere. And Krishna says that's not true. That because the falls in the early stage are generally because of material desires, Krishna says, I fulfill all their material desires. So what are the desires that come in a materially motivated soul? Wealth, fame, aristocracy. So Krishna gives the soul the opportunity to take a birth over here. And if they fall in a mature state, they take birth in a devotee family. And so in a mature state, the fall down is because of some anarthas, like Bharat Maharaj, right? Some anarthas that is very, very latent, it falls. And Krishna, as a reward, gives them an opportunity to take birth in a devotee family. And in both cases, Krishna says that eventually there will be success. If a person falls in an earlier stage, then driven by his previous desires, he will take to Astanga Yoga, right? And he will become he will practice Astanga Yoga, maybe achieve Paramatma realization. Person falls at a later stage, and because of their advanced understanding of the soul and Paramatma, because of the birth in a devotee family, they'll take to Krishna consciousness and develop a personal relationship with the Lord. So the point that Krishna makes is, and Krishna says that for one who does good, nothing bad will ever happen, my friend. He says that to Arjuna. So even though process of Astanga Yoga is long, difficult, the chances of falling are very, very high. But Krishna is so affectionate, right, about people who are striving, and even if they're failing, that he's very, very quick to protect and reciprocate. So given the fact that Astanga Yoga is long, difficult, chances of fall down are high, why does Krishna speak about Astanga Yoga? It's a bona fide process, right? It's Sakriti Dhyate Vishnu, Treta Yagate Maka. So in the Satyug, that was the process. Even people who were executing Bhakti, they were executing it through Astanga Yoga. Right? In the Bhagavatam, we see Kardam Muni, devotee, a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. But how does he worship Lord Vishnu? By sitting on the banks of Bindu Sarovar and meditating for 10,000 years on the Supreme Lord. Dhruv Maharaj, Narad Muni instructs him, do this, Astanga Yoga, and meditate on Krishna. So it's a bona fide process. So he speaks about it. It is also a natural progression for one who is making gradual advancement, right? So not everybody gets the benediction of Bhakti. So for those who have not come in contact with devotees, for those who haven't been purified enough to get Bhakti, what is the process they follow? They follow Karma, Gyan, and Astanga. That's their next step. So Krishna speaks about it. And Krishna also speaks about it to show that it's not practical, especially in the age of Kali. Right? So obviously in Satyuga it was the recommended way, but in the age of Kali it's not practical. Once Krishna talks about all the do's and don'ts, then anybody who's reasonably sincere will understand that not possible. Right? Prabhupada says that Arjun was in Dwapar Yuga, and in Dwapar Yuga people still had they had remnant siddhis, like we could see. Arjun had siddhis, Duryodhan had siddhis. So even the jivas, the regular jivas, they had some siddhis that they were carrying over from the previous yugas. And Arjun was a very, very exalted person. But he himself says, I cannot do it. So if somebody as advanced as Arjun is basically expressing concerns that cannot be done, for us it is impossible. Right? So Krishna speaks because of that. Summation that Krishna spoke, that one is sufficiently purified by Nishkam Karma, then they may give up karma and practice Astanga. It requires control of urges, sense control, and then mind control. The earlier part of Astanga Yoga requires active engagement, and this is why it's in the karma section. The later part is giving up this engagement and being in meditation. Process is long and the chances of fall down are very high, right? Some of the examples that Prabhupada often gives is that of Vishwamitra, that he had been meditating for 1,000 years, and then Menika came and he didn't even see her. He just heard the sounds of a nupur, her ankle bell, and that meditation broke. And for 100 years he enjoyed, or Saurabh Rishi, he was sitting in the water. He was such an advanced yogi that he was able to control his breath and still sit inside water and meditate. But then he saw the fishes mating and he gave up his practice, came out and had 50 wives, married 50 sisters at the same time. So the process is fraught with fall downs. Now, in all these cases, Krishna still maintains his promise that Vishwamitra, he did resume his practice. For Saurabh Rishi was a little bit more difficult because he also engaged in Vaishnava Aparadh. He cursed Garuda, but still there was that protection there. And the path that Krishna ultimately is now leading to us is him. So if you see that in Astanga Yoga, Krishna is stepping out of the shadows, right? He presents himself as Paramatma. He presents himself as the object of meditation. In the first 5 chapters, Krishna is in the background, right? Except for a few verses in the 4 chapters where he speaks more responsibly to Arjun's doubt. Like Arjun says, how can you be superior to the sun god? And then Krishna speaks a few verses, Jam Karam Chame Divyam. It's like, so just to assure Arjun that just the knowledge that's coming from me is bona fide because I'm God. But otherwise, Krishna is in the shadows. In the 7th chapter, he comes completely in the forefront. And the 6th chapter is when he's emerging from the shadows and presenting himself more and more. Right now, he's presenting as a Paramatma, as object of meditation. From the 7th chapter, he will present himself as Swayam Bhagwan. And from the 7th to the 12th chapter, Krishna is all about himself. And then he's not shy. He basically goes to great lengths to glorify himself, talk about exclusive devotion, etc. And because now he's interacting to somebody in the mood of a devotee. Okay. Okay, so this brings us to the end of it. And so I'm going to pause over here, and I probably have taken more time than I should have, but I think Rup Raghunath Prabhu, you said the next is Q&A or presentations?
No, Prabhuji, for today, it will be Q&A.
Q&A.
There were
Okay.
4 pre-recorded classes, plus you gave the very nice overview. So if devotees have questions, they can raise their hands and clarify.
Okay. Okay.
Presentation will be next week, Prabhuji.
Okay. Okay. Any questions, comments? Prabhu, do you have a comment? Or no?
Yeah, Prabhuji, I wanted, it was a very nice class, Prabhuji. While you were explaining this bona fide, but yet kind of complicated process to have a connection with Krishna, right? Somewhere where my mind went to what you have described earlier in your classes as Shunyavadi philosophy, wherein, there is a lack of, it's more done as a solo mode, and there is no action, real action, there's no Sankirtan movement. So, and I know it's not Shunyavadi, but somewhere my mind is going there. So, but it looked like more of that, wherein you're just sitting on your own and, trying to make a connection and not interacting with anyone. So where is the boundary, Prabhuji? How is it different from those non-bona fide philosophies, so to say?
So the Astanga Yoga, as I mentioned, that's obviously a bona fide process because Krishna speaks about it. However, one always has the freedom to take that process and misuse it. And that's applicable for everything. Even for people who are practicing bhakti, you see people misusing it. Like we have the Sahajiyas who pretend to be very advanced devotees and they cry, and you'll have people who read the Bhagavatam for money. So it looks like it's devotion service, but it's essentially corrupted. So so things like, people who take the Astanga Yoga and instead of meditating either on the Paramatma or the Lord or Brahman, they meditate on the nothingness, right? That's the Shunyavadi. So these are the corruption of the process.
Yes.
Prabhupada also talks about people who perform this process only for the siddhis. So one of the things that happens and this starts happening even at the earlier stage of the yoga, is that one begins to develop mystic opulences. And they're able to travel in the subtle body, they're able to read other people's minds and thoughts. And it's explained that it's not the goal of Ashtanga yoga, but it's a secondary consequence, because the process of Ashtanga yoga gets one closer to Krishna's Chit Shakti. So just like the iron comes in fire, it starts becoming like fire. The yogi, because of following the process, Krishna is the master of the mystics, so they also start getting mystical powers. But then they make that the goal, that let me get more mystical powers. Like, Vishwamitra, he was a Brahma Rishi, and he essentially had the power to construct another universe, like the same powers that Brahma had.
Right.
When the whole Trishanku quarrel began, he began to construct an alternate universe. So these are the situations, as you mentioned, where people take a bona fide process and corrupt it by altering the destination according to their misconceptions.
Understood, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you.
go next in the queue. Padmani Radha Mataji, you want to?
Okay.
Hare Krishna Bhayahari Prabhu, Hare Krishna Rupa Raghunath Prabhu. Dandot Pranam. Hare Krishna everyone on the call. Prabhu, firstly, thank you so much for such a wonderful class. And it really is very, very helpful when you recap from the beginning. I'm sure it is time consuming at your end, but as you said, it's easy for us to understand the flow of the instructions. So thank you so much for that. Prabhuji, I have two questions. The first question, I think it is a little bit silly, but I just need some clarification. So when we are trying to practice devotional life and or develop or work on a devotional life, we are told, even when we sing happy birthday, we say that may you never take birth again, and we go back to Godhead. So my question is, if that is our ultimate goal, to go back to Godhead, in the process of going back to Godhead, do we still go through these three processes of karma, jnana, and ashtanga?
So if I try to paraphrase the question, you're saying that those who practice bhakti, do they still go through the process of karma, jnana, and ashtanga?
Right.
Right. So the answer is yes. Prabhupada, in the purports, he keeps making this point that one does go through this process, but as a byproduct of bhakti. Like, for instance, in the 6th chapter, he will make this point that the Ashtanga yogi will forcibly try to bring their mind to Krishna. For a devotee, the mind is focused on Krishna because of his love to Krishna. So, and then he makes this point, therefore the devotee is also an Ashtanga yogi. In case of the Gyan, Krishna says, Prabhupada says, that the notion of Gyan is Atma Gyan, is understanding the soul. But when one, through the practice of bhakti, worships Krishna, then along with Krishna, one automatically gets the knowledge of self. Like, gives the example of the sun, that when the sun rises, it illuminates three things: the sun, the self, and everything around you. So when Krishna appears, then you see Krishna, but in that light, you also see yourself and the others around you, right? Which is essentially Krishna Bhagwan and the Paramatma realization, the Atma realization, and the Prakriti, understanding Prakriti there. So all these processes one still goes through, but they are subsumed within the process of bhakti. So when Prabhupada says that bhakta is the greatest of the yogis or the greatest of the jnanis, he's not just saying to glorify artificially, but factually, all this is available, but as a byproduct of Krishna consciousness.
Okay. So if I understand this correctly, I guess for both the destination is the same, but one path may be difficult physically to follow, like of Ashtanga yoga, whereas Bhakti yoga it requires a lot of practice and control of your mind, but it is relatively easier to follow if you so desire. Is that correct understanding?
Absolutely. It's relatively easy to follow. It includes the other processes. And the biggest advantage is Bhakti does not have any prerequisites. Like, so we spend, and that's why I take time out to talk about this gradual progression. You cannot become an Ashtanga yogi unless you have gone through Sakam, Nishkam, and Gyan Yoga. Cannot become an Ashtanga yogi. But from the stage of Vikarma, you can become a Bhakt, right, directly. You can be the most sinful. Valmiki, most sinful of the person, became a devotee. Narad Muni, Dasaputra, no qualifications, became a devotee. So that's the other advantage that's there, that the gradual progression is not needed. Does not mean that the progression does not happen. And it relates to the earlier question you asked, the progression happens, but it happens within the process of bhakti.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. And then my second question was slightly more practical. So today in today's talk, when you were, I guess, recapping the previous chapters, you were talking about adhikar and how you were talking about practicing devotees, how some people practice um, uh, they take their instructions, or they get up at 2 a.m. in the morning, do their rounds, followed by DT worship, and they go about their day with no complaints, and they're very happy. So Prabhu, my question is, when we see people like that, and we very routinely see them within our associations, it is very easy to look at them, or at least this is, I can definitely speak for myself. It is very easy for me to look at them and immediately reject the idea that I'm not at that level, so this does not apply to me. So my question is, how do I, push myself or challenge myself to get to that stage? Because I feel that I want to be in that stretch zone, but I don't end up going there because I think that it's just beyond my capacity. And it's not going to come to me naturally because I'm not matured enough in practicing my devotional life.
It's a good question, Mataji. So the focus is that when we see personalities like that, we don't aspire to imitate them, but we get inspired by them, right? So, and inspiration is what, and I think you used the right term. Inspiration is what will get us into the stretch zone. So we don't imitate them, right? Prabhupada used to give that, or that verse is also spoken, right? One who tries to imitate Lord Shiva and drinks poison dies. So great personality should not be imitated, but they should be used as a source of inspiration. And when we see around us, we seek their association, we get instructions from them, and we also understand that this is where we should be setting our compass to. That maybe we can't get up at 2 o'clock, then maybe get up at 6 o'clock, at least, right? And do that. And then the 6 o'clock might become 5 o'clock, or, I mean, I'm not being anal about the time you get up, but because you used that example and I also used it. So, the point you made is the stress zone. Prabhupada would say that a complacency can be the biggest failing of a devotee. You see the devotees, they say, okay, I've been initiated, I'm chanting 16 rounds, I have a spiritual name, so I'm all set. Earlier on, they used to have this term that I have bought my ticket for going back to Godhead. So I have my ticket, while my ticket is in my hand, I'm set, right? That's complacency there. So we should not be complacent. We continuously go into the stretch zone, do a little bit better every day, and the process will purify us. The people who get up at 2 o'clock and chant, they don't look at it as a burden. For them, but they've also gone through that process. If not in this lifetime, previous lifetime, they've also gone through the process. They're right. So if they can do it, then we can also do it eventually.
Much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Tarun,
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you so much for wonderful class. So my question is on, I'm kind of sometimes stuck in these two words, sannyasa and karma yoga, even in chapter 5.2. Sannyasa is said to be renunciation of work, and karma yoga, Prabhupada is saying to be work in devotional service. So when we say karma yoga, I thought it is completely on the platform of karma without devotion. Devotional service is more like bhakti yoga. So if you can explain the difference between two. And also for the sannyasa, my understanding was you renounce everything so you can focus on Krishna and you can focus on one of the path, whether it is a Dhyan yoga or whether it is bhakti yoga. So if you can help me understand sannyasa, karma yoga and bhakti yoga, how these words are used and what is the real meaning behind them.
Okay, so I'll try and give a quick summary that so there is the giving up of the activities, and there is a giving up of the attraction to the fruits of the activity, right? So giving up the activities is sannyas. So sannyas is the stage where you actually give up the performance of the activities, right? So there are two ways to become free of the reactions of work. One is to not do any work, so there's no reaction to it, and the second is not be attached to the fruits of the work, right? So that's why Krishna says they are the same, different paths to it. But sannyas is more difficult because if you give up work and you still have desires, then you'll be forced to fall down, so to speak, right? So you noted that Prabhupada says karma yoga is acting in Krishna consciousness, and this is something that Srila Prabhupada does right from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that he brings bhakti to the forefront even before Krishna is bringing bhakti to the forefront. And as an acharya, that's his prerogative, because Krishna is taking Arjun through this path of gradual development. Okay. So this is Nalini, if you can mute. Yeah. Okay. So when karma yoga is spoken at that stage, from a technical perspective, the karma yoga that is being spoken at this stage is nishkam karma, acting without desires. From a practical perspective, for us, nishkam karma is not possible. For people like you and me, it's not possible. We are not even at the stage of performing pious activities because of we are born in this age of Kali, and for a reason, the souls have been chosen to born at this age of Kali because of the sinful disposition. So we don't even have the ability to perform nishkam karma. So what is our qualification then? The mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to perform bhakti. So that's where Prabhupada keeps getting our attention back again and again, that bhakti is the way. Because we are doing Bhakti Shastri, we tend to look at it from a more analytical perspective also. The purpose over here is not to basically say, and Prabhupada of course knows all this that Krishna is saying. The purpose over here is not to say that Prabhupada has mistakenly spoken about bhakti, even though Krishna is speaking about karma yoga. Prabhupada knows clearly what Krishna is speaking about. Prabhupada also with the vision of Acharya clearly knows what her qualification is. Right? So beginning right from 240 in Shastri, right? And that's actually the first time Krishna speaks about devotion. Prabhupada doesn't hold back Bhakti, 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 second, third, fourth. Wherever he cannot speak directly about bhakti, 6th chapter purports you have read, right? Wherever he cannot speak about bhakti, he will criticize the other process. So if you read the 6th chapter, in the verses, Krishna is glorifying Astanga Yoga, Prabhupada is criticizing Astanga Yoga. Not because he's disagreeing with Krishna, but he's trying to make this point that this process is not for you, right? So he's speaking directly to us.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. This fully clears my doubts.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the last question from Tina Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, can you please explain me again about this internal focus and meditation?
So the initial 4 stages are essentially preparatory stages, wherein one gets control of the urges, the senses, and the mind. So now when you have control on the mind, you have the ability to voluntarily pick up the object of the mind. So like at our stage, we don't have control on our mind. The mind, based on a previous impression, it goes wherever it has to go. And properly practicing Astanga Yogi at the stage of Pratyahar, he now has sufficient control on the mind to say that I would like to put my mind over here. So that is Pratyahar. The first stage is detaching it completely from the material conception. So far, the mind, the food, the ahar of the mind was the senses, everything that it is getting from around. So yogi says no more material attachment. Dharana is, so where do I put it now? And there the yogi can say that I put it in at the lotus feet of Krishna Swayam Bhagwan. I meditate on the 4-armed form of Krishna in my heart as Paramatma. I meditate on the impersonal Brahman. Or if for some reason the yogi is misguided, they may say I focus on the void, or whatever their dharana is, wherever they take it. And then that becomes their object of dhyan and samadhi. Right? So there is the gradual process of detachment. At Pratyahar, there is the switch where one goes from material to non-material. At dharana is that then they place it wherever they want to go. And dhyan and samadhi is then that becomes their object of meditation, that becomes their destination.
So, Prabhuji, like we are doing chanting and we are focused on our chanting. So it comes in dharana or dhyana?
So when we are doing our chanting, and if you're doing a good job at it, it comes at the stage of dhyan and samadhi. Right? So for a devotee, while they don't go through this gradual process, but when you chant, then you're at least trying to put your mind towards the holy name, which is non-different from the Lord, right? When you chant, you go through these successive stages of Nam, Roop, Gun, and Leela, right? First you focus on the name, then the qualities, then the form, and then the pastimes. So these are all the symptoms of the successive symptoms of dhyan and samadhi. You have already subsumed the process of pratyahara and dharan. You have already accepted the fact that Krishna is your object of meditation, right? You have already at least attempting to detach from the material conception. So that has, for a devotee, that has already been done. So if you read the purport, that's why Krishna will let Prabhupada at different points will say that is why a devotee is more advanced than a yogi, because they begin from a stage that the yogi matures into. But for us, it's mercy. It's not that we become advanced yogis and all that, but it's because of mercy that we're at that stage.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you. So Hare Krishna, I'll end over here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you so much, Bhayahari Prabhuji.
Jai Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank
Hare
you so much.
Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for the class,
Bye.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.